Connect. Welcome to this semester's portfolio information session. We'll basically kind of go through the process of your portfolio, answer some basic questions, and kind of get you more prepared to get your materials together, to get ready to submit your portfolio, things of that nature, so that you feel very, very comfortable and you will be ready for the end of the semester. And here with us today we have our ALA student chapter president, Ashley DeWitt. Former. Ashley DeWitt. And we also have the chair of the exam committee for the semester, Dr. Lisa O'Connor, who will be here to talk with you a bit about the portfolio as well. So I'd like to start by saying for those who have Adobe Connect up right now and are in the room, there are important documents. There's the current portfolio guidelines, and there's also just a document that has some frequently asked questions that we put together for today, and we will be sending that out after the event in an email. And anytime that you need to, you can go to SLIS's website at ci.uky.edu/LIS. If you go to the main menu, go to Graduate, Library and Information Science, Academics. Out of that menu, you'll see a link, Portfolio Project. That page will also have links to all of those important documents and a little bit of a timeline to kind of show you how to go through. There's also a link to a tutorial that kind of goes through the Blackboard interface for portfolios as a walkthrough, and it's very helpful. So that's all there. I encourage you to visit there. If you have any questions, you can email Student Affairs, and we'd be more than happy. More than happy to help answer any questions you may have. So I will go ahead then and turn it over to Dr. O'Connor.
I was going to suggest if you want to talk about being eligible to graduate.
Oh, yes.
I can do that part.
Okay. You want to talk about that, Ashley?
Yeah. So at this point, if you are graduating this semester, by the end of the semester, you have to have completed 36 hours in LIS courses or have permission to take Cognate courses, and you'll know who you are if that's the case. For the rest of you, it's 36 hours in LIS courses. You have to have a GPA of 3.0 or higher. You have to have completed those core courses, 600, 601, 602, 603, and 636 before the semester that you're graduating. So everybody, if you're graduating this semester, you should all be fine. I would have told you already if there were any issues, so no one panic. You have to submit the degree application form through MyUK. Everybody's done that if you're graduating this semester. And you also have to submit the degree candidate form, which is also called the final examination form. It's got two different names, through the graduate school. That's, if you guys have been getting emails from me for the last couple of weeks, that's what that form is. So if you haven't gone back and checked that one yet, to make sure that you have at least 2 check marks, do that now. Some of you may already have 3 check marks because Sandra Vance in the graduate school is actually going through and processing all of our applications right now. So I'm keeping an eye on it. If you look at it and something looks wrong, just send me an email, ashdewitt@uky.edu, and I will go back in the back end and check all your paperwork. But 36 hours, 3.0 GPA, do all your paperwork, have your core courses done before the semester that you're graduating.
I'd also add, if I can, if you have unfinished incompletes, do not wait until the last couple weeks of school to finish those, because faculty are going to be inundated with final exams. Portfolio grading's a bad time, so you want to get incompletes in way before the end of the semester, so that those get graded and
Processed
entered in a timely fashion.
Particularly if you have an incomplete in one of your core courses or one of those credits that you're going to need, because those are going to be artifacts. So you don't want to wait till the last minute and then not know what your grade's going to be or have anything to put in there. It won't reflect well. The other thing, I know that anyone who declared for graduation this semester has probably been receiving the email newsletter series for portfolio that goes through the process completely. It'll have links, tips on writing. If you haven't received that and you're interested in being on that list, please email me at uklis ms.student.affairs@gmail.com, and I'll make sure that you get subscribed and get those links. There's I think a 6 or 7, it's a 7-part series, and it goes through submission as the portfolio as well to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. So that will be sent out also.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Do you want to go over the basic, when it's due, what you need?
Sure. So the due date for the portfolio is March 25th by 4:30. You don't want to be working on it at 3:30, so you have to allow for all technical glitches because they do happen, so get it done early. That's my best advice to you. If you want comments from your advisor, which I highly recommend, at the very latest, you should have your documents to your advisor by March 7th. And I would recommend before that because this is an exceptionally large class that's graduating right now, and faculty are going to be overwhelmed. And the earlier you get yours in, the more time they are likely to have. You can imagine on March 7th, if we get 14 portfolios to look at, yours is not going to get a lot of attention because we just aren't going to have a lot of time. So early. You have to enroll yourself into the portfolio Spring 14 Blackboard course. If you haven't done that, then you need to make sure you are entered. Let's talk about the structure of the portfolio first. Remember that essentially the portfolio is designed to do 2 or 3 things. It's designed to give you time to reflect back on your degree, of what you've learned, and what it means to you. It's also designed to give evidence to this program faculty that you have accomplished everything that we are responsible for making sure that you've accomplished in order to get that degree, saying that you now have this skill set or this set of professional competencies. So, and as an additional use, you might use some of this for a job application. Putting all this stuff together can be useful. You can put some of this on a website, this stuff that you're especially proud of, and point employers to it as evidence of what you've achieved. So there are several purposes there. Now, everyone really fixates, I think, one problem I often see is that everybody really fixates on the artifacts. So artifacts are assignments from your courses. They're the work that you've done. And what I want you to do is realize that those are not the center of your portfolio. This is basically like, think of this as like putting together a legal argument, that all the artifacts are your evidence that you can point to. So the more artifacts, the better, in my opinion. You can't, you don't want to put things in there maybe that you're not proud of, but the more strong artifacts you have, the better. You're required to have them, and there's a list of the specific ones you're required to have, from 600, 601, 602, 603, and 636. I would also encourage you to use artifacts from electives that were important to you, from your field experience, from independent studies if you have them. Everything, and actually, I don't know if these would be artifacts, but you also want to consider extracurricular activities as part of your evidence. So they won't necessarily be in the artifact list, but you can discuss them. So all these things are just there, and they are things that you're just going to point to as evidence of that what you're saying in your learning outcomes essay is true. Your learning outcomes essay is the center of your portfolio. It is the place where you make your argument. So you're making a case that I have met these 8, I now have met and can exhibit these 8 professional competencies. And you certainly want to organize your learning outcomes essay by those competencies. Within each competency, there are specific learning outcomes that you're responsible for showing that you've achieved. So what you want to do, the whole purpose of your learning outcomes essay is for you to explain in detail how the work that you've done, including all your artifacts, your extracurriculars, your involvement in professional associations, any work experience you have, everything that you bring to this, how it demonstrates that you've met that competence. So you're going to say, competence 1, foundations of the profession. I've met this competence, and here's how this artifact demonstrates that that's true. Here's how this one does. Here's how my professional field experience demonstrates that's true. What you don't want to do is just say that literally, but you want to explain it. So artifact 1 demonstrates that I've met this competence because it shows that I can XYZ, or it shows that I know XYZ. So you're not literally just pointing them and saying, go look at it. You are explaining how that artifact is evidence and in what particular way it's evidence. You want to also use the explicit learning outcomes in your essay so that the less you make the reader connect the dots for you, the better off you are. The more explicit you can be, the more you can say, here's the beginning of how I achieve this competency, and here are the 2 specific learning outcomes that this demonstrates right now. And you can use some shorthand for that. You can use the numbers, or you can use parts of the phrases, but you want to connect all those dots. That's what you're doing. The onus is on you to make that case that, hey, I've got these professional competencies. And in fact, I don't know that really your advisor actually needs to see all your artifacts necessarily. The most urgent thing that you need to get to your advisor is that learning outcomes essay. That is the centerpiece. And that's what you need to get the feedback on. So let's see. It says a 10-page minimum. I don't know how much we actually enforce a minimum, but it should be a significant document that is very specific. The other things are your CV and your personal statement. Those are important, but in my mind, they're a little bit less important. Just make sure your CV is accurate and error-free, ready for, basically what we're going to do when we look at your CV is make sure it's ready to go out to employers, so we don't see anything glaring. One thing that we often see is the degree is wrong. Make sure that you know that you're getting an MSLS, not an MLIS. So it's an MSLS. At this point, your CV, unless you've done an awful lot, should probably be only 1 or 2 pages, unless you've got an exceptional background and work history that you can bring to it. With a professional CV, you don't want to go too far back. You want to say professional or pre-professional library experience, other relevant professional experience, but you don't need to go back to, working at Chick-fil-A in high school. So you want a professional resume. Your personal statement is, again, it's a little bit less critical in my mind. You don't need to go too far back. I don't know that we necessarily need to know that. If I could tell you how many of these start with, well, I really loved books and I loved being in the public library when I was a little kid, and that's why I'm here. Probably want to start a little later than that and keep it very professional. Less on the personal and more on the personal professional. Let's see. I think that's all I have to start with. So we can just take questions. Oh, the other thing I would say is if you haven't gone through the tutorials and all the stuff that we've put up online for you, that stuff we've written especially to help you through this. So it's really vital that you read all that, or you may miss something critical. So if you haven't done anything yet, that should be your first step, is go back and read all that stuff, because it's written precisely to make this easy for you. Oh, one other thing. If you don't have some artifacts because they didn't do them in that class, then there's nothing you can do about that. You can't make it up. So you simply need to explain that that semester you didn't have an exam in 600. If you have to draw on something, then you'll have to draw on something else to establish your competence in that area. So part of this is a problem of having gone through the program before we knew we were doing the portfolio. So now we know what the artifacts are. We don't ever not do them, but if you went through the program before we started the portfolio, then you may have had a different course set of assignments and things. So all you can do is work with the artifacts that you have, but you do need to let somebody know that they're not there because you didn't do them. If you don't have your instructor's comments, you can see if your instructor still happens to have something, but if not, again, there's nothing that can be done about that. The other thing I meant to say is you also don't want to take your artifacts and only apply the artifacts that came from 600 to the foundations of the profession competence. Your artifacts all are fair game for all the areas of competence. So wherever you see work that can strengthen your argument, use it. You're not constrained by course numbers and that sort of thing. So apply whatever evidence you have wherever you think it works, not necessarily just where it belongs. Now, you don't want to go too far with that. You don't want to ignore your 602 artifacts when you're talking about your ability to organize information, because clearly they're meant to demonstrate that. But you don't have to be constrained to those limited artifacts. I think that really is all now.
Heather, are there any questions online?
We do have a question, and I'll just address it because it's one that I've been getting often. And that's some 600 level courses, they had quizzes before where now we have an essay. So if you can get in and do screenshots of those that you have in Blackboard, if you need access to them or having problems, please email us. But it's perfectly acceptable if you didn't do that for your class, you're not going to be penalized because that was just the format that was used. So that will not be a problem. Just make sure you mention in your learning outcomes that the assignment was quizzes and not an essay, and this is how I did this versus this is how I was showing my writing proficiency or whatever would go with that. And I know that some people have classes with people who are now no longer with us. If you're trying to get an instructor's comments and they're no longer in the program, it's again perfectly acceptable to say the instructor was unavailable to comment on this assignment, and just discuss other things further. Again, if you're having any problems, feel free to email Student Affairs, and we will see what we can do. But also, if you haven't already, there is a summary of artifacts form. It's kind of hidden, and we apologize for that. It's in the guidelines, it's the appendix. If you go through that, it will actually show in kind of a tabular form, here are my core courses, these are the artifacts that are expected, and it gives you a space to fill out how you are going to fill that requirement. And then you can go through that and just send that to your advisor so that they can see that you have everything planned out and this is how you're going to do. And that will help a lot when for them to refer to when they're looking at your portfolio. But for the most part, planning is probably, if you are, I know we have a couple people who aren't spring graduates who are wondering what should I be doing right now. Right now you are actively working on your portfolio by completing your core artifacts. So what you need to do is just, when you finish a big assignment or a big project, you need to make sure you save those copies of it. Save the last graded copy that you have, make sure that you have that together, because once you have all that together, you are basically just, again, using that as evidence for your learning outcomes essay. You want to make sure that when you're going through, you know which artifacts you have, you know what you're going to, maybe just take a piece of paper out or type something up real fast. This is this artifact, this is what I'm going to, these are the competencies I've met through it, and just have that information ready so that when you go through, you know exactly how you're structuring your argument and your learning outcomes essay to show you have met these competencies. So if you're wondering what to do now, I would say just start doing that. Start looking over them. You've got the materials up. They probably will not change in the next year or so, so you have plenty of time to reflect and prepare based on the guidelines that are currently there, what you would be doing for your portfolio.
I would also say if you don't have your professor's comments and, you know, let's say you got a really good grade, then I think you could have some self-reflection that could substitute for that, saying, you know, clearly, given the grade guide, I performed strongly in this area. Conversely, if you did very poorly on an assignment, this is maybe the most problematic thing for some people. If you did very poorly on an assignment that is a core artifact that you've got to have in there, you don't redo it. But what you want to do is discuss why you struggled with it and what you've done subsequently that does demonstrate that you overcame, what you learned from that assignment, what you've done subsequently, and how you can demonstrate that you actually have fulfilled it, even though that assignment maybe doesn't reflect that. I would just second Heather's point that if you work on this as you go through your core courses, you will find that your portfolio will be almost everything but done when you're finished. Making good notes about what you've learned and what experiences you can put towards that while you're in the midst of it will greatly simplify your work at the end. I think this is particularly important if you're taking a long time because you're working or because you just have to take it slowly. If you took a core course 2.5 years ago, that makes it much tougher to talk about it. So if you know you're somebody who's going through the program on the slower side, make really good notes as you go along.
Do any of you have questions?
And has anyone already started to share their portfolio with their advisor yet at this point? I don't know how further along our people are. I know some people were trying to get through that learning outcomes essay and get those drafts done. It was good. If you do experience any issues with Blackboard, because technical problems do happen, again, please email Student Affairs and we will get it sorted out. Just let us know right away, don't delay, so we can get that fixed for you. I think we have some questions. So we have some questions about some 636 classes. Again, this goes back to did your class do this versus this? Some classes did quizzes, some classes did essays. For some people, they used Microsoft Office Suite for their productivity applications. For others, they used OpenOffice or LibreOffice or one of the open source software. If you use that, just submit everything in the original file format. And if you had things that went along with things such as queries or reports that were generated, I would just make sure you be selective about your artifacts and what you're including. You want to choose the most inclusive option. So I would choose maybe, make sure you're at least meeting the first level of the core course requirements. Obviously your website is going to be in there. And anyone who has kind of specific questions about, because I'm seeing a lot of kind of individual questions, such as, I was in this semester, but then I switched and I had this class instead, and so I don't have the documents for this class. If you are concerned about any of your classes and your artifacts and meeting the core course requirements, and you haven't done your summary of artifacts form, please go ahead and go over that and contact your advisor. If you're having problems accessing something, you can also contact Student Affairs. We'll try to help you with that. But those sort of specific questions about okay, what do I need in my case? That's where you need to contact your academic advisor as soon as possible, just to make sure that you are meeting those competencies and that that is your plan.
Well, and I would just remind you again, what you did in the course is what you did in the course. That cannot be changed. There's no need in getting upset or distraught over that. If you simply don't have something that you did, that's another problem, and you're going to have to figure out a solution to that. But if you took a course and it had a different set of assignments in it, there's no changing that. We're not asking you to go do new assignments for the portfolio. So you've got to bring what you have to demonstrate what you've learned. That's all you can do. You can't change what was.
When we're talking about like formatting stuff on Blackboard, when you have like the professor's comments, do you just like put that at the end of the document? How do you put that with the artifact?
Those comments, especially should go in the artifact description, but also if they're poignant should be mentioned as evidence and kind of showing how you accomplish learning outcomes in the essay. I recommend, and this is my method, it's again, everyone has their different way of getting everything organized, but when I did the portfolio, I literally just went through my artifacts. I did a short description, what was my grade, what did the instructor say, what learning outcomes did I need in this assignment for each of my artifacts that I had selected, and I was able to put that into the description area. You'll see that when you're going in to attach the artifacts, and I think the third email in the portfolio email series has some screenshots that goes through that process.
And I think you want to be consistent.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you decide to do, do it consistently across all of them.
We do have a question. Artifact substitutions are okay, or do they require prior approval? I think that goes back to if your class views this, you have to use that. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't go back. If you are substituting for a class that you took instead of another class or something like that, that would just be something I would talk with your advisor about. I would contact them, and if you don't know who your advisor is, please email Student Affairs, and we'll make sure that you are connected with the person who's your current advisor.
So in other words, if you took 600 and you did not have a final exam, you just had a series of quizzes, you do not need to get permission for that. That's the way it was. Explain it in your portfolio and be done with it. If on the other hand, for some reason, you think you need to make another kind of substitution, then that probably is something you need to discuss.
And the portfolio guidelines go through some of those common substitutions, right, Heather?
Mm-hmm.
For those of us, because we're basically all in the same sort of set of, we'll say 4 to 5 years, those substitutions are going to be common across a lot of people, and so they're actually in the document that says, this is what you're supposed to have for 600, but you may have X instead, and that's fine. So if you haven't gone through and read the portfolio document yet, it may answer a lot of your questions about substitutions, because you're not the first person to run into that issue trying to do the portfolio. A lot of other people were in that class with you, so they're facing the same thing.
But again, I just encourage you that these are really technical issues, and what you really want to focus on is that learning outcomes essay and making a strong argument. Too many times I think people spend too much of their energy and effort worrying about their artifacts and what they've got and how they are, and not nearly enough time making that substantive argument about what you've learned. I would argue that you could almost have the portfolio without artifacts more than you could just throw in a bunch of artifacts and not have the learning outcomes essay, right? Because it's up to you, you're making that case. And we may not look at every artifact you have. If you're making a really strong case about what you've done, we'll check to see if they're there, but we may not even look directly at it because you've made such a strong case about what you know and how that artifact demonstrates it, it's clear you know what you're talking about. So you want somebody to be able to read that learning outcomes essay, in some cases without even looking at that artifact, and reading it and say, yes, this person clearly has this competence. They really understand what they got out of this program. So focus on the substance less than these more technical issues. Those are secondary.
If it would help, I'm doing the portfolio this semester with a lot of the rest of you, and I've gotten to the point where I've already sent my materials to my advisor, and I can tell you how I approached it. It's not the only way, but if that would be helpful, I'm happy to share that with you guys. Take that as an overwhelming yes. The first thing I did over winter break was literally gather what I thought I might use as artifacts. It was just a basic list, projects, obviously the ones that you have to have, and then things that I was proud of that I had done in other classes that I thought might be helpful to help me show that I had met a learning outcome. Then I went through and I went back to the portfolio guidelines and I read them again to make sure that I had everything I was supposed to. And I used the handy appendix that's got the lovely list of the learning outcomes and if you have this artifact, this is probably what you're going to end up using it for to prove that you've met this competency. And then I went through my artifacts and I had a list of them, and I wrote down all the learning outcomes that I thought went with that particular artifact. I think it shows this, I think it shows this, I think it shows this. So I ended up with a list of about 16 artifacts that all had learning outcomes kind of attached to them. Okay, this one should prove this one should prove this one should prove this. And I actually ended up taking 2 artifacts out. I took out 15 and 16 because they only were helping with one learning outcome that I had plenty of other evidence for. So I didn't really need those. And then I went through and I wrote a summary. What is this artifact? What did I do in it? What was the assignment? How does it show that I've met this learning outcome? Very briefly, so that I had that to refer back to, which was basically my summary of artifacts. I did it in the process of getting ready to write my essay. Pulled out all my comments, had everything all together. And then I literally went back and matched, okay, for core competency 1, here's learning outcome 1, learning outcome 2. Which artifacts did I have for these learning outcomes? And I created an actual outline so that when I went to go write the paper, everything was already there for me. And I only had to refer back to it to actually write the essay. And then I just went through over one weekend and I wrote it out because you know your artifacts, you created them, you've already written the summary. It's basically just putting down on paper what you already know. How is this an example of how I've met this learning outcome? Like Dr. O'Connor said, it's not just, oh, well, this artifact shows learning outcome 1 for competency 2. Why? Why does it show that? So the clearer that you can be in your explanation, the better off you are. You want to connect the dots, make them really explicit. Heather?
I just wanted to chime in because I've gotten questions from friends of mine who've done their portfolio when we were working on it when I was graduating, and then also again this semester. It's a question that comes up, and it's how do I start writing? I want to really emphasize that the most important thing is to go through the competencies and the learning outcomes. Do not organize your essay around the artifacts. They are not the primary focus. They're the evidence. That, you have a straightforward thesis for the topic for this paper, which is I am ready to receive my degree because I have met the competencies for the program as evidenced through my work that I'm showing through these artifacts. And that's what your focus should be on. So it's those specific examples that illustrate that. I know, for instance, when I did my portfolio, I had included an artifact that I was really proud of. Actually, I think it was for your class, Dr. O. It was just a little analytical article review that I did that talked about privacy and security for libraries and students in other countries. And I wanted to include that because for the diversity part of the portfolio, for those learning outcomes, because I really got into that topic and I really enjoyed the writing that I did, and I thought that it was structured well. I got a good grade on it, so I included that, and I made sure that I put it in that learning competency at that level to show that I did this for my understanding of this particular that led to my being able to have this particular competency upon graduation. So choose things that are specific examples, and it's fine to have an artifact that has more than, in fact, you probably have quite a few artifacts that can show that you've met more than one learning outcome through them. You just want to make sure that you choose the best example to illustrate how, not just what you learned, but why that's important. I learned to do this in 636. I learned to make a website. Why is that important? What did you know? And that's where the learning outcomes come into play. They show why what you learned is important. So this, has got me up to skill with this competency. Again, just go through and have very specific examples.
I think you made a couple of good points there. The first is that you don't need a lengthy introduction to your learning outcomes essay. You don't need to write a couple chapters. Just, some people feel like they really need to, well, professional competencies are important to my education because, well, we know why you're doing this. You don't need a really long introduction. Put those competency 1. I mean, I think it sounds like the way you approach it, and the way I would approach it is I would lay out those competencies and those learning outcomes. And that would be my outline for my paper. And I would say, all right, now let's see, what can I say about this one? And I would draw from any artifact that's relevant, and I would draw from any experience I had in the program. If you went to alternative spring break and you learned something amazing, it should be in there. If you had an amazing internship and you learned a lot, then it should be in there. If you went to a professional conference and you learned something, it should be in there. And draw from those and also from the artifacts in very specific ways. But I can't say it, I mean, this is at least the 3rd or 4th time we've said it, but do not organize by artifacts. My first artifact shows that I learned this. That's totally backwards. Here are my learning outcomes. I can prove I have this learning outcome because A, B, C, D, E. And the next one, I can prove this learning outcome because D, C, B, X. And this one because of A, D, E, and F, right?
Basically, the organization is set for you. Don't deviate from the pattern.
No.
Just go in order.
This is not the time for creativity, really, or, this is the pattern. You're absolutely right. The pattern is set. You are just trying to make it so explicit to someone that they cannot help but say, oh, well, pass. They've got it all. They're fine.
Yeah. And the other reason for that is to keep you sane when you're writing, because if you try and structure it any other way, you're just going to be running around in circles trying to find a point at the end of each paragraph. When you do it structuring just by the learning outcomes, having that as your outline, I can tell you, because that's what I did also, I thought, oh, this is going to take forever, 10 pages, and then I started and I had my articles, my artifacts that I already gone through, and I went, this is going to be for this, and I had my little plan, and all I had to do was plug them in and connect the dots. It was already laid out, and by the end of that weekend, I had written the paper, or at least had a good draft.
And remember, what you're talking about is, I have met this learning outcome, and this is how you know I've met this learning outcome. This artifact gives one specific little example of how I did this, but your point isn't that the artifact gives the evidence. The point is that you got it, and that artifact is just one small thing that demonstrates that you have it. So it may not demonstrate the entire lot of it. It's just one example. So I understand, I just go back to the example you were using.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how important privacy, ethical stances in LIS are. I understand why privacy is important. I understand why intellectual freedom is important. And here's one little thing that can give you some evidence that I do understand that.
And Heather, Dr. O, correct me if I'm wrong, you do not have to show evidence for every single learning outcome.
No, you want
As many as you can get.
as
but-
many as you can get. You want to make the strongest possible statement that you have the competence. It's really the competence that's actually the most important thing. But the learning outcomes are what add up to that competence. So you want to cover as many as you can.
And for anyone who's confused about competencies versus learning outcomes, in that portfolio guidelines, there are about, I think there are 7 areas,
Eight.
there are eight competencies, and they all have different learning outcomes associated with them. So you want to focus on getting the competencies for, not the learning outcomes necessarily having all of those met, but more these learning outcomes for this competency I have met. This shows that I have met this competency. And organize, I organized, I think, when I did my essay, I organized it around the competencies and went through the learning outcomes for each that I did. So that's when we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about those specific things that make up having those competencies that are associated with the competencies.
And absolutely use section headings. Competency 1. Competency 2. Keep asking yourself, if I had to read 59 of these, what would I be looking for? How can I make it so obvious that nobody stumbles? Because when you start, I'll just be honest with you here. If you make someone go, I wonder about this person, then they're going to start really reading your essay a lot more closely. Whereas if clearly you've made the case and you've connected all those dots, then somebody gets through it pretty quickly and they say, wow, yeah. That's what you don't want, that extra scrutiny, right? You want to make the case so handily that just remember these are, long products that you've put together. And so you always want to help your reader. I learned this when I was writing my dissertation. I thought it was going to be some amazing intellectual product that would prove just how smart I was. But in fact, what I had to do was say a lot of the same things over and over and over again to take my reader's hand and pull my reader through the whole thing so that they didn't have to think too hard about getting through it. And that may be a little cynical, but it's the truth. You've got to envision, if you were reading this, what questions would be left unanswered, and make sure you answer those. Don't leave your reader wondering, Hold their hand, take their hand, and pull them through all those 8 competencies so they go, wow, okay.
So for those of you who are submitting this semester, don't panic. 1, don't panic. This is not as big of a deal as everybody kind of makes it out to be.
No.
You're well prepared to do this because you've gotten through the program. And take your time. Parse this out into little pieces. Don't try to sit down and crank it out one weekend if you haven't started. Pull your artifacts together. Figure out what competencies and what learning outcomes they go with, and do little by little. So
Write
maybe
the easy one first.
Right.
Write the one that seems to you, don't write them in order. If you think the second competency, oh yeah, that one's going to be easy to write it first. And you could even go as far to send one competency to your advisor and say, hey, is this kind of the tone, the structure you're looking for?
So little by little. It's a lot more manageable if you just take it in smaller chunks. I know it seems really overwhelming, but it really isn't. You have 8 competencies, a CV, and a personal statement. And even the personal statement, it's 5 questions you kind of have to answer. Answer a question during your lunch break. 1 question each day of the week, and by Saturday you'll have answered them all and you can put them together in a holistic essay.
And it's important to kind of get started little by little now, again, because of time. You want to make sure, instead of, at the very least, worst case scenario, things happen, you've already got a good amount of a good amount of material together
and then you can go, okay, well, I'll just, I can at least send this to my advisor by that date. And instead of, you know, life happens, I don't have anything ready. That's, you know, a reason to kind of get your outline started, get some of these going through, and also make sure you understand what you're writing about. If you have questions about the learning outcomes and the competencies, or you need clarification, talk to your advisor, ask someone, you know, and you know, that's important too. You want to make sure that you understand what you're writing about, and then have someone else read your writing. Please have someone else read your writing. You know, not just your advisor. Obviously, their input is going to be really, really important. You want to make sure that you're doing everything in the right tone, you have things organized well, that you're readable. But, you know, it could just be reading out loud to yourself even, just to make sure you hear what you're saying.
Right, you don't want, this is a formal opportunity. You do not want to use lots of contractions or lots of LOLs or informal types of speech. This is, keep it really professional. Just, it's all professional. Even your personal statement, again, it's not really a personal statement, it's your personal professional statement. And really that is to give us evidence that you understand that it's going to be important for you to have goals for your career, that you know that your skill set that you have right now is not going to be sufficient for the rest of your career, that you know how to build on that skill set going forward, that you understand that being active in professional associations are one way you can further your career and your skill sets, that you understand the importance of networking. That's the real goal of your personal statement, is to show that you sort of have a plan for your career going forward. If you spend too much time looking backward, then you're really probably putting emphasis in the wrong place.
So does everybody feel a little better about getting into this if you haven't started, or if you have started, do you feel like you're on the right track?
Yes.
Good.
And I did have a question from Haley Found, one of our students. Can the portfolio be submitted earlier than March 25th? The answer is technically yes, you can, but you should not feel like you have to rush. You want to make sure that you have everything very completed, that you've shared with your advisor, that you've had that discussion to make sure that this is the best possible portfolio that you could have put forward, and then go on and share with the class, which is how you submit your portfolio for final grading. I thought I should mention, and that's in the email newsletter that was sent out about portfolios. When you submit your portfolio, you're not submitting it so much as sharing it with the grading committee. So you'll be sharing your portfolio. So there's no confirmation page that pops up saying, congratulations, you've submitted your portfolio, thanks so much. No little pop-up to let you know. It will just appear as shared with the course name in Blackboard. So that, I hope, clears up a little bit of frustration people might have later on. I know I got a lot of calls past semester about that, because it is a little bit confusing, but that's actually what's happening, is you're sharing it, not technically submitting it. So don't worry if you don't see that little screen that says, oh, it's submitted.
And they won't be graded early. They're all graded in the same period of time. So turning it in early is fine, but it's not going to change any.
You won't get your grade any earlier.
Takes about we try to have grades back to everybody, or not grades, you know what I mean, the outcome within 2 weeks.
I have a really horrible question, but I'm a really anxious person, so we talk a lot about passing the portfolio, which is always what we want to do, but how do you fail the portfolio? Like, what's it that what would be missing in order for you to fail it?
Heather, there's a checklist in the portfolio guideline, right?
There's a checklist of everything you need. I really, the only way I can see someone would fail a portfolio is if they just failed to write a good comprehensive learning outcome essay. They did not have their core artifacts. You know, again, very unlikely. If you've gone through the program and you should have all those materials. So it's just a matter of sitting down and contemplating, how am I going to connect this to, how am I going to show this competency through these learning outcomes? What evidence do I have from my artifacts that shows that? I would not be concerned with failing. I would just be concerned with doing the best you can do on your essay, putting that time into getting everything organized. If you put in that time and you dedicate yourself to having that ready and to putting yourself into it, to getting that feedback from your advisor, from your instructors, if you do that, then you really don't have anything to worry about. Worrying is just going to be something that's going to detract, from your ability to do everything else. So I know it's hard to say don't worry, because it is really hard to, sometimes to get out of that mindset. But if you focus on just doing that task, I think it will really center you and give you a better experience with completing your portfolio.
I think most people who fail make one of a couple mistakes. I bet, I don't have any proof about this, but I bet that 90% of the people who've ever failed simply never gave any of their stuff to their advisor to look at, first of all. So that's the first big mistake. They just, I don't know if it was the night before and they said, oh my God, I gotta get all this stuff up. And they just threw it all up and they thought, well, if I have all my artifacts, I'm gonna be okay. Then, that's a big mistake, because it is that thoughtful essay that we want. So sharing it with your advisor is the first best defense against failing. Because if you're in trouble, then that advisor is going to say, wait a minute, whoa. Especially if you give it to them more than 2 weeks in advance so they have time to look at it. And again, especially the learning outcomes essay. I don't think somebody's CV is probably going to get you failed. If you didn't have it in there, we'd say, you got to get this in here. I guess it could be so awful maybe, but largely it is going to be based on the learning outcomes essay and the personal statement. But so that's the first thing, not taking the time to give it to your advisor early enough so that they can read through it and let you know if you're on really the wrong path. And if you're really anxious about it, I would highly advise that you write one competence and give it to your advisor and say, hey, is this about what you're looking for the rest of them? The other and more rare thing is that we have a few people, and I mean a few, we're talking not one every semester, one every so often. We have a few people come through the program who really have some challenges with writing. They've probably been told that over and over and over and over again. And it's so incoherent, poorly, the grammar's so poor, there's no punctuation or odd punctuation that doesn't make any sense. That makes it so difficult to read that you can't even get through it. And you just go, oh, I don't even know what this says. If we can't read it, then we can't know whether you've succeeded, right? So if you've been told repeatedly that you have writing problems and you need to go to the writing center, go to the writing center. With this, make sure that you have overcome that. Make sure that you are able to express it adequately. But I'm not talking about 1 out of every 5 people or 1 out of every 20 people. This is a pretty rare. And you should have already heard it if you have a serious problem.
And if you are going to go visit the Writing Center, make those appointments now. There are only so many graduate consultants, and as graduate students, you can only see graduate consultants. So you can make those appointments in advance, and if you want to go see them and they have online appointments, you don't have to go in person, go ahead and make those now. Get those appointments set up, and then if you find that you don't need a couple of them, go ahead and cancel them so that somebody else can have that slot.
But if you've written a bunch of papers for the program and you've never been told, hey, you have a serious problem, then you probably don't. You're probably fine. So this should not be, this is nothing like coming in and taking an exam on the spot, or, this is really should be, this should be a time for you to sit back and recognize all the things that you've achieved and learned. It really should. This actually should be a
Uplifting.
pleasant experience for you because
Celebratory.
it helps you go, well, I'll tell you what this does. If you take it seriously and you really think about it, this is going to make you empowered when you go in for job interviews because you are going to be able to talk about what you know, and that's what you have to do on a job interview. And that's what a lot of people have a problem with now. They might know a lot, but they go in and they're not used to talking about it. And so you've got to learn how to talk about your expertise. You've got to learn to talk about what you know. And when you go in for a job interview, this will have given you that practice of talking about what is it that I learned, what is it that I know, and how am I going to apply it to the work world.
Really, the whole portfolio is prep for you to get a job if you think about it that way. Talking about what you know, you've already created your CV and it should be in a good place. And even your personal statement, someone's going to ask you, well, why did you get into this? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's all questions that you're going to be asked at a job interview, and you have the advantage of having answered them already.
And I have a point about the personal statement. The personal statement, I answered those questions really quick over my lunch breaks, just like Ashley has suggested when I wrote it the first time. Then I went and I set it aside. I just set it aside, set my CV aside, I set all that aside, and I organized my artifacts, wrote my learning outcomes, got all that done. Then I went back to my personal statement after I had done all of that kind of soul searching through my work in the program to see what I actually really had accomplished and started to fill in those blanks. And that really tied everything together. And then I was able to really flesh out my personal statement, make it much stronger, and more importantly, I was able to look at that and understand it and be confident in it, which I think is something that's hard to do maybe when you're first starting out. So if you can't churn out right off the bat this amazing personal statement, don't worry, it's a process. Once you go through your learning outcomes and you've written that and you really look back at everything that you have accomplished, then it'll sink in. You'll have that moment when it'll sink in and it all makes sense and you'll see where you're going. Because, it's hard sometimes to answer personal questions in a professional manner. So if you have yourself grounded in your learning outcomes essay beforehand, finishing that personal statement, it will not even take you. It'll hardly take any time at all after that. So don't worry about, I have 2 things to write and what should I focus on? I guess I'll do this because it's shorter. And then you get stuck, because sometimes that happens. You just get stuck on the personal statement. You're really not sure where to go. Don't focus on it. I would say turn your focus on the learning outcomes essay, and then everything will just follow.
Just take it a day at a time.
Yep.
There's no reason to be stressed out about this.
Any last questions?
It looks like we're done here online. So I guess just thanks everyone for being here tonight. It's always fun to come out and talk about the portfolio. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact Student Affairs, myself or Will Bunton,
Your advisor.
Yeah, especially your advisor with, if it's writing or
Contact,
something, yeah, and do that sooner than later. But don't worry and
Be happy.
be happy. Thanks, everyone.